Almost a full calendar year ago, I brought you guys a video where I unboxed and reacted to my first ever smartphone. Not right then and there, but when I got my first smartphone, that's the one that it was. It was the Palm Pre. And you guys seem to actually really enjoy this video. It got, a decent amount of views. So I kind of figured as I continue to build up my phone collection, going back through some of the phones that I've owned, getting them again, also taking a look at some phones that maybe I never had the opportunity to get, and finally getting my hands on those, I thought it would be fun to take a look once again down memory lane, this time at the second ever smartphone that I owned, and my first Android device ever. And I think what makes this doubly cool is that unlike the Palm Pre that I had to source from eBay to just get my hands on another one, this is actually my phone. It had somehow managed to survive several moves at my family house. I think another family member had actually used it briefly about 20 years ago at this point, and it just kind of came along with them. I got my hands on it. Unfortunately, there were some problems that had to be fixed before I could try to enjoy this thing again. Those of you who might follow me on social media got a sneak peek at this one. I went on eBay, I found a replacement screen, I took it apart, I swapped that screen out, and ladies and gentlemen, it is alive, feeling like Frankenstein himself. This is the HTC Evo 4G, a phone that when it came out was seen as just like a ridiculous super phone. I don't know if it was the first to do any of these things, but it was among the first to do a lot of these things. We'll look at GSM Arena here. This thing had a whopping 4.3-inch display, which doesn't seem all that big now looking back. In fact, it seems extraordinarily small, but at the time, that was seen as such a large screen that, heck, you might actually need a kickstand built into the back of your device because you're going to be watching movies on this bad boy. I mean, with a screen that big, who could blame you wanting to watch a full feature film? But it goes deeper than that. An 8-megapixel camera was pretty darn high end. Now, again, there were some Lumia phones that were doing crazy stuff, but that was seen as a pretty big deal. A 1 gigahertz processor, Qualcomm Snapdragon, 1 gigahertz, that was also really high end. Some of this is a little bit strange. 1 gigabyte, 512 megabyte RAM storage. I think what they mean here is that maybe there was a gig of storage and half a gig of RAM. I know that half a gig of RAM is correct, which, I mean, look, if you compare that to something like the Palm Pre that came out just a year prior, 256 RAM, 3 megapixel camera. Look at the display, 3.1 inches. I absolutely loved the Palm Pre, but from just a strictly hardware perspective, going from Pre to HTC Evo was insane. Let's take a closer look at the hardware because there's just so much to look at. So on the back, I obviously already pointed out the kickstand, and it actually did work really, really well. And I do actually remember using that. There is that 8-megapixel camera. Mine is the white unit, and interestingly, it's like red underneath the white paint. And as you can see, that is definitely showing through. This thing got more than its fair share of use. You could probably imagine a headphone jack there at the top. We have volume rockers, which when I put the thing back together, I screwed that up and these no longer press. Maybe I'll get in there and fix that. Maybe I won't. Power button is up at the top. That's when we thought that was a good idea still. It's not. That was never a good idea. Dumb place to put a power button. On the bottom, we do have our USB micro charging port, and that is an HDMI port because, again, this was such a powerhouse. You were going to plug it into your TV, right? You were going to use this thing on an external monitor. Here's a cool feature. The back just comes right off. What a novel idea. There is your removable battery. The SD card slot is right underneath, right down there, which I have actually got one installed because you can't do anything without an SD card. You can't take a picture without an SD card. You got to have one, so I went ahead and popped one in there. On the front side, we'll go ahead and unlock this so that We'll cut down on reflections a little bit. We have our navigation, home, menu, back, and then a dedicated search button, which just pulls up Google on your home screen. Definitely a different time back then with these different navigation options. And this is what an HTC phone looked like back then. It was very, very distinct. You had your classic HTC clock widget up there at the top, Google search widget, and this was a Sprint device, so it is absolutely loaded down with Sprint things. I keep wanting to swipe up to get to the app drawer, but that's not how you do it. You got to hit this little up arrow, and there is your app drawer. Now, unfortunately, this device cannot really do a whole heck of a lot of anything right now. I was like, well, let's try out the YouTube application, and unfortunately, it doesn't work. And then I thought, well, okay, let's go into the internet browser and we'll just go to YouTube. And that also does not work either. Then I thought, why don't we go into the market, what the Play Store used to be called, tried to sign into my Google account and it will not let me sign in either. I thought it was because of two-factor authentication, disabled that, tried to log in, still, it just will not accept my password. So yeah, I can't really test a whole heck of a lot on this thing just because it is so doggone old. But one thing I can do really quickly here, oh my goodness, Nova was installed on here. Do you guys remember Nova? Man, what a blast from the past that is. Let's take a look at this camera. I'll take a picture real quick and I'll just show you on the screen, I guess. There you go. My dog's waiting as I am filming. Can I pinch to zoom in? Was that even? There you go. I was about to say, surely pinch to zoom was an option. Very, very grainy, despite the fact that this is in pretty decent lighting. The camera performance, yeah, probably leaves quite a bit to be desired. There's a picture I took the other day whenever I first put the SD card in there. Again, yeah, not great. But again, you know, going from this Palm Pre to this device, that screen felt absolutely enormous. It felt like an entirely different world. And yeah, look, I still adore the Palm Pre. I love how this user interface works. I think that they got like so much so very right with this device. The software in particular, man, modern operating systems are still stealing so much from WebOS. But yeah, that just felt like the future. And then we get to the actual future, and you know, this is the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, which is not like a particularly massive phone for today's standards, unless of course you open it, and then you have to contend with the idea of having this in your pocket versus this, when this was so big that you needed a flipping kickstand. It's just so funny looking back. It's so quaint. Notice this 4G toggle over here on the side, and you may be wondering, why would you need a dedicated toggle like that for 4G? Well, that's because this was not LTE, this was WiMAX, which is a failed, dead version of 4G that Sprint had. And you might want to keep it turned off when you weren't using it, because when you were using it, oh my God, the battery. You could just watch this thing's battery go down. I remember going to like one of the only places in Knoxville, Tennessee that had WiMAX at this point, which, if I'm not mistaken, was the Westtown Mall. If you're from Knoxville, shout out to Westtown Mall. You know what I'm talking about. Turning this on, doing some tests and so forth, and it was quite a bit faster, but this phone got hot and that battery was just disintegrating. I really wish that I could get in here and like test out more things and show you more things, but just nothing works. So guys, that was the HTC Evo 4G, one of the first phones I remember looking at that from that hardware perspective just absolutely blew me away. And that is why I wanted this phone. It seemed so high end. I've always gravitated towards sort of oddball devices. The Palm Pre definitely falls into that. And the reason this was an oddball was because I remember just getting this thing in my hands and thinking, this is unbelievable. The size, the speed, the power, the screen, the kickstand, it was just absolutely right up my alley. Did you have this phone? Let me know in the comments down below. What was your experience like? I don't actually think that I used it all that long. I think I went back to a Palm Pixie at some point, not too long after getting this, not like months or something, probably like a year or something like that. Maybe I just really loved WebOS. But let me know what your experience was with the HTC Evo, or maybe you had the Windows Phone equivalent. What was that called? The HTC HD 2, maybe? Something like that. Hit those comments down below, guys. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more content like this. And until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.